The fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor of the Blackwood ranch house. Outside, snow fell in thick curtains blanketing the Montana landscape in winter's silence. Inside, the warmth battled against the cold seeping through gaps in the logs, a familiar dance that had played out for 40 years in this place. Daniel Blackwood sat in his leather chair, the one Anna had given him for their 10th anniversary, back when the world still made sense. His hands, gnarled and spotted with age, rested on the armrests. 77 years had carved deep lines into his face, each one a story, each one earned through sun and wind and choices that kept a man awake at night. His hair, once dark as riverstone, had gone white as the snow outside. But his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, remained sharp as the day he first saw these mountains. Across from him, his grandson Samuel shifted in his seat. 17 years old, tall and gangly, caught in that awkward space between boy and man. The boy had his mother's features soft around the edges, but Daniel saw something of himself in the set of the jaw, the way Samuel's hands moved when he was thinking, restless and searching. Samuel had come to the ranch that afternoon, arriving on horseback through the gathering storm. He had something on his mind. Daniel could always tell. The boy had been quiet through supper, picking at his food, glancing at his grandfather with questions he did not yet know how to ask. Now, in the firelight, Daniel decided it was time. "Samuel," he said, his voice rough from years of shouting orders across open rangeland, "do you know how a man's worth is measured?" The boy looked up startled. He shook his head slowly. "Not by money," Daniel continued, leaning forward slightly. The chair creaked beneath his weight, a sound as familiar as breathing. "Not by the land he owns or the cattle he runs. A man's worth is measured by the decisions he makes when nobody is watching, when it would be easier to walk away, when the right choice costs more than he can afford to pay." Samuel's eyes widened slightly. He leaned in, sensing this was not idle philosophy. This was something real, something his grandfather needed to say. Daniel looked past the boy through the window where snow swirled in the darkness. He saw not the present, but the past. Saw himself at 35, broken and hollow, living in a cabin half this size. Saw the wagon wheels cutting through autumn mud. Saw a girl with frightened eyes and calloused hands. In 1882, Daniel said, his voice dropping to something almost reverent, "When I was your age plus 18 years, I made a decision that some folks called foolish. Some called it worse than that. But that decision gave me everything I have today, including your grandmother, including your mother, including you sitting here now listening to an old man talk." Samuel straightened in his chair. "What decision, Grandpa?" Daniel smiled, a sad, knowing curve of his lips. "The day I traded $35 for a dairy cow named Maple, and got a whole lot more than I bargained for." He stood slowly, joints protesting, and walked to the window. Outside, the world was white and endless. Inside, the past came flooding back with the clarity of yesterday. "Let me tell you about the autumn of 1882, Daniel said. "Let me tell you about a girl named Emma Hartley and the day her uncle tried to sell her like livestock." The fire popped. Snow whispered against the glass, and Daniel Blackwood began to speak. The autumn of 1882 came hard and fast to Montana territory. One day the aspens were green and full. The next they blazed gold and red, a brief celebration before the long dying. Daniel Blackwood watched the changing seasons with the same hollow awareness he had watched everything for the past 2 years. He saw it. He noted it. He felt nothing. The cabin stood at the edge of a meadow backed against a stand of ponderosa pine that provided some shelter from the north winds. 160 acres of deeded land paid for in full, with money saved from 5 years of trapping and 2 years of railroad work. 20 head of cattle, 3 horses, a shed for tools, and feed a small chicken coop that needed repairs, he kept putting off. It was everything Daniel had wanted when he first came to Montana with Anna. Everything they had worked toward. And now it felt like a monument to failure, a daily reminder of what he had lost. He rose before dawn, as he always did. 4:30 by the clock. Anna had insisted they needed, though what use was a clock to a rancher? The sun and the animals told you everything you needed to know about time. But he had bought it for her, and now he kept it wound, kept it running because stopping it would feel like admitting she was never coming back. He made coffee in the battered pot, strong and black. No sugar, no cream. Those were luxuries from another life. He drank it standing at the window, looking out at the grazing land where mist rose from the grass like spirits reluctant to leave. The routine was always the same. Check the trap lines first while the morning was still cool. Then feed the livestock. Repair whatever needed repairing. There was always something. A fence post rotted through. A board on the shed pulling loose. The corral gate hanging crooked on its hinges. He fixed things methodically, without hurry, without joy. Just the work of staying alive. By noon he would eat whatever was simplest. Beans from a can, jerky, and hardtack. Sometimes he would heat up a pot of stew that would last him 3 days, eating it cold when he could not be bothered with fire. Food was fuel, nothing more. Afternoons meant more work. Chopping wood for winter, hunting if the stores were low. Once a month a trip into Pine Ridge for supplies, speaking only as much as necessary, avoiding the sympathetic looks and careful questions. Evening came early in autumn. By 6 o'clock the sun was sliding behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that Anna would have called beautiful. Daniel saw only darkness coming. He would sit by the fire, then a book in his lap that he rarely read his eyes, instead drawn to the corner of the cabin where the wooden cradle sat. He had made it for Thomas, working by lamplight through a whole winter carving animals into the headboard. Bears and elk and eagles. A world of wonder for a boy who would never grow old enough to see it. The cradle sat empty. Dust had gathered on it over 2 years, and Daniel could not bring himself to wipe it away. Dust meant time passing. Dust meant moving on. He was not ready for dust. Next to the cradle, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from smoke and moisture, was a carved wooden elk. Thomas had made it, or rather Daniel had made it, while Thomas watched his small hands guiding the knife, sometimes his voice bright with questions. Will it have antlers, Pa? How many points can you make the leg stronger so it looks like it's running? The elk was half charred on one side. Daniel had pulled it from the ashes of the old cabin, one of the few things that survived. He kept it as a reminder of what he was not entirely sure. Love, maybe, or failure, or both. This was Daniel Blackwood's life in the autumn of 1882. Work and silence and ghosts. He drank no whiskey, though God knew the temptation was there. His father had been a drunk, mean, and worthless, and Daniel had sworn as a boy he would never become that man. So he stayed sober and felt everything, and sometimes wished he could just stop feeling altogether. Sheriff Duncan Ross had told him once, about 6 months after the fire, "Daniel, you got to find a way to live again, not just survive, live." Daniel had not answered. What was there to say? The people he lived for were gone. Everything else was just motion. But life, Daniel would learn, had a way of arriving whether you were ready or not. And on a cool afternoon in late October, life came rolling up his property in a wagon driven by a man he despised. Daniel was in the shed when he heard the wagon. The distinctive creak and rattle of wood and iron, the plodding rhythm of oxen pulling a load. He set down the hammer he had been using to straighten a bent nail and stepped outside, squinting against the afternoon sun. The wagon came slowly up the rutted track that served as a road. Daniel recognized it immediately. Belonged to Silas Hartley, a man with a reputation that preceded him like a bad smell. Gambler, cheat, seller of snake oil and false promises. He had tried once to sell Anna a miracle tonic that would cure her headaches, charging $5 for what was probably creek water and whiskey. Daniel had run him off with a shotgun and a promise that if he ever saw Hartley near his wife again, they would need a shovel and a quiet spot in the woods. That had been 3 years ago. What brought the man here now, Daniel could not imagine and did not particularly care to know. The wagon pulled to a stop near the split-rail fence that marked the boundary of the yard. Silas Hartley climbed down his boots, hitting the dirt with a soft thump. He was a man in his early 40s, though poor living had aged him badly. His face was gaunt eyes, bloodshot and restless. He wore a vest that had once been fine but was now stained and worn, and his hat sat crooked on his head like he had put it on without looking. Behind him in the wagon bed, Daniel could see a dairy cow. Red and white spotted, sturdy build, probably 4 or 5 years old. A good milker from the look of her. And sitting beside the cow, partially hidden in shadow, was a figure in a faded dress. Silas approached with his hand extended and a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Blackwood. Been a long time." Daniel did not take the offered hand. He stood with his arms loose at his sides the way he had learned in the army, ready but not aggressive, watching, waiting to understand what game was being played. Silas lowered his hand, the smile fading slightly. "Heard you might be in the market for a dairy cow. Got one here. 4 years old, healthy, gives about 3 gallons a day. Asking $50. Daniel's eyes moved past Silas to the animal in question. He knew cattle the way some men knew cards or women, could read health and age and temperament from the stance and the eyes and the condition of the hide. This cow was indeed healthy, well-fed, not abused. Worth the price Silas was asking, maybe a little more. But something did not sit right. Silas Hartley did not deal in honest transactions. There was always an angle, always a catch. $35, Daniel said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "And I checked the teeth first." Silas frowned, calculating. Then he shrugged. "Done." Daniel approached the wagon slowly. The cow watched him with large, calm eyes. He reached out, let her smell his hand, then gently opened her mouth to examine her teeth. 4 years old, as claimed. No signs of disease or poor nutrition. The udder was symmetrical, not inflamed. A good animal. He released the cow and stepped back about to agree to the purchase when Silas spoke again. "There is one more thing," the man said, his tone carefully casual. "I need you to take the girl, too." The words hung in the air like smoke. Daniel turned slowly to look at the figure in the wagon. She had not moved, had not made a sound. Now in the shifting light, he could see her clearly. A young woman, perhaps 19 or 20 years old. Thin to the point of gaunt, her dress patched in multiple places with fabric that did not quite match. Her hands folded in her lap were rough and calloused. The hands of someone who had worked hard for a long time. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, as if she were trying to make herself smaller, less visible. Her hair, a light brown, was pulled back in a simple braid that had come loose in places. And her eyes, when she briefly glanced up before looking down again, were the eyes Daniel had seen before. In horses that had been beaten, in dogs that had been kicked too many times, eyes that expected pain and had learned not to hope for anything else. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. He turned back to Silas. "Explain." Silas waved a hand dismissively. "My niece, Emma. Her father, my brother, died in a mining accident about 4 years back. Mother ran off before that. I took her in, did my Christian duty, but I cannot keep feeding another mouth. She is no use to me. Cannot have children, the women in the family told me. Barren as a rock. But she can cook, clean, mend clothes. Basic things." Daniel's jaw tightened. He could feel the anger building slow and cold. Not the hot rage that made men stupid, but the deep, controlled fury that came from seeing something fundamentally wrong. "You are selling your niece," Daniel said. It was not a question. Silas bristled. "I am finding her a situation, better than what she would get otherwise. You need help around the place. She needs a roof. It works out for everyone." Daniel looked at the girl again. Emma. She had not reacted to her uncle's words, had not protested or argued. She simply sat there accepting this fate the way she had probably accepted everything else life had thrown at her. Resigned. Defeated. Daniel knew what would happen if he refused. Silas would take her somewhere else. To Copper Creek, probably the mining camp 20 miles south. The things that happened to women there, women without protection or family, were not things decent people spoke about. The mining camps chewed up girls like Emma and spat out what was left. He thought of Anna, remembered something she had said to him once early in their marriage. They had been in town and had seen a woman being dragged by her husband, the man drunk and mean. Daniel had started to turn away to mind his own business, and Anna had stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Strength is not for showing off, Daniel," she had said. "It is for protecting people who cannot protect themselves." He had broken the drunk man's grip and given him a choice between leaving peacefully or leaving on a stretcher. The man had chosen peace. Anna had smiled at him, then proud and gentle. "That is the man I married." Standing in his yard now 2 years after losing her, Daniel heard her voice as clearly as if she stood beside him. He turned back to Silas. "Here is my offer. $35 for the cow, and I will take the girl, but not as property, as a hired hand, housekeeper. I will pay her $2 a week, provide room and board. She can leave any time she wants, no questions asked." Silas's face twisted in confusion and annoyance. "You do not understand. I do not want to pay her. That is the whole point." Daniel stepped closer. He was a big man, 6'2", and he knew how to use his size when necessary. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "That is my offer. Take it or get off my land." The two men stared at each other. Silas was the first to look away. He needed the money more than he needed pride. "Fine, whatever. Your funeral when you realize what a burden she is." Daniel went into the cabin and returned with paper and a pencil. He wrote out 2 documents in his careful, blocky handwriting. The first was a simple bill of sale for the cow. Maple, he wrote, because he remembered Anna's cow from before they were married had been named Maple, the cow that had died during their first winter in Montana. The second document took longer. He wrote it as carefully as he knew how, making sure the words were clear. Employment contract. Emma Hartley agrees to work as housekeeper for Daniel Blackwood. Wages $2 per week paid each Sunday. Room and board provided. Contract may be terminated by either party at any time with no penalty. Signed this day, October 28, 1882. He signed his name at the bottom, then handed the pencil to Silas. "Sign as witness." Silas scrawled his signature without reading carefully, too focused on the $35 Daniel counted out. Bills and coins, cold and final. The price of a cow. The price, as far as Silas was concerned, of getting rid of a burden. The transaction complete, Silas climbed onto his horse, which had been tied to the back of the wagon. He tipped his hat in a mockery of politeness. "Pleasure doing business, Blackwood. You will see, she is quiet. Too quiet, if you ask me. But at least she will not talk your ear off." He rode away, leaving dust and the faint smell of cheap tobacco hanging in the air. Daniel stood in the silence that followed. The cow Maple shifted her weight and lowed softly. The girl Emma still had not moved. She sat in the wagon as if frozen, her hands clutching a small cloth bag that held Daniel assumed everything she owned in the world. He walked to the back of the wagon and looked up at her. "You can come down now." She flinched at his voice but did not move. "I am not going to hurt you," Daniel said. His tone was gentle, the same tone he used with frightened horses. "You are safe here." Slowly, cautiously, Emma climbed down from the wagon. She kept her eyes down, would not meet his gaze. She stood very still, waiting for instructions, waiting to be told what to do. Daniel pointed toward the cabin. "Inside, you will need a place to sleep." She followed him, her steps hesitant, the porch boards creaking under her worn boots. The inside of the cabin was clean but spare. One main room with a table, 2 chairs, a stone fireplace that served for both heat and cooking. A small bookshelf that held perhaps 20 volumes, surprisingly many for a rancher living alone. A door led to a second room, the bedroom where Daniel slept. Another door led to a smaller room, barely more than a closet that had once been used for storage. Daniel led Emma to the small room. It held a narrow cot, a wooden crate that could serve as a table, a hook on the wall for hanging clothes. A single small window looked out toward the pines. "This is yours," Daniel said. "I cleared it out this morning." He had not actually. Had cleared it out 6 months ago in a fit of restless energy, some half-formed idea that maybe he should hire help. But he let the lie stand. "There is a lock on the door. Key is on the inside. I will not come in without knocking first." Emma looked at the room, then at him, then quickly away again. She seemed unable to believe what she was hearing. Daniel continued in the same steady, methodical tone. Work hours are 6 in the morning to 6 in the evening. Your jobs are cooking, cleaning laundry, and helping with the livestock when I need it. Nothing beyond your strength. If you get hurt or sick, you tell me immediately. Understood. A tiny nod. Wages are $2 every Sunday. I will pay you in coin. Food and lodging are free. If you need clothes or boots or anything else, I will provide them. You can keep what you earn or spend it however you like. He paused, making sure she was listening. You have the right to leave any time. No reason needed. But if you do leave, tell me one day ahead so I can prepare. If you leave in the middle of the night without word, I will worry and come looking. Not to bring you back, just to make sure you are safe. Clear. Another small nod. Daniel took a breath. This next part was important. One more rule. The most important one. Emma finally looked up, her eyes wide with barely concealed fear. I will never touch you, Daniel said, his voice firm and clear. Not in anger, not in any other way. You are not property. You are not a servant I own. You are a hired worker. I am your employer. That is all. Do you understand? For the first time Emma spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, rough from disuse. Yes, sir. Do not call me sir. Call me Daniel, or Mr. Blackwood if you prefer. Yes, Mr. Blackwood. Daniel nodded. There is water in the barrel by the door. Bread and salt pork on the table if you are hungry. I will be outside for another hour finishing work. Make yourself at home. He left her there, closing the door behind him. As he walked back outside, he heard the soft click of the lock turning. Good. She felt safe enough to lock the door. That was a start. That night Daniel sat by the fire long after dark. Emma had emerged from her room, once taken some bread and water, and retreated again without speaking. He had heard her moving around, the soft sounds of someone trying to be invisible. Now the cabin was quiet, except for the crackle of burning wood. Daniel held the photograph he kept on the mantel. Anna and Thomas, taken a year before the fire. Anna was smiling, her hand on Thomas's shoulder. Thomas was grinning, missing his 2 front teeth, holding a wooden horse Daniel had carved for his 6th birthday. I do not know what I am doing, Anna, Daniel said softly to the photograph, to the empty room, to the ghosts that lingered in corners. I saw that girl and I could not turn away, but I do not know if I can do this. I could not protect you. I could not protect Thomas. What makes me think I can protect her? The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, an owl called low and mournful. Daniel closed his eyes and remembered. October 15th, 1880. The date was burned into his memory like a brand. He had been out checking trap lines, a 2-day trip into the high country. The weather had been good when he left. Anna had kissed him goodbye, Thomas clinging to his leg, not wanting Pa to go. I will be back tomorrow night, Daniel had promised, and I will bring you a surprise. A real surprise, Thomas had asked, his eyes bright. A real surprise. But the horse had thrown a shoe on the 2nd day, and Daniel had been forced to make camp an extra night while he worked to repair it. He had been annoyed at the delay, impatient to get home, but not worried. Anna was capable. She could handle 2 nights alone. He had smelled the smoke before he saw it, a cold, dead smell that made his stomach drop. He had pushed the limping horse faster than he should have, his mind refusing to believe what his gut already knew. The cabin had been reduced to ash and blackened timbers. The roof was gone. The walls had collapsed inward. Smoke still rose from the ruins, thin and gray. Sheriff Duncan had been there along with 3 men from town. They had seen the smoke and ridden out to investigate. Daniel, the sheriff had said, his face gray. I am sorry. We got here as fast as we could, but the fire was already out by then. Daniel had dismounted and walked toward the ruins. Duncan had tried to stop him. You do not want to see Daniel. Trust me on this. But Daniel had pushed past him. He had to know, had to see. They were at the back door. Anna had tried to get them out. She had made it almost all the way, Thomas in her arms. The smoke had taken them before the flames did. That was what the doctor said later, trying to offer some small comfort. They had not burned alive. They had simply stopped breathing. Daniel had knelt beside them, his mind refusing to process what his eyes saw. His hands had reached out, then pulled back, unable to touch what was left, unable to accept that these charred remains were the people he loved most in the world. He did not remember much after that. Duncan said he had screamed a sound like an animal dying, said it took 3 men to pull him away from the bodies, said he had fought them with a strength born of madness, trying to get back to do something, anything, though there was nothing left to do. They buried Anna and Thomas 2 days later under the aspen tree, where Anna had liked to sit and watch the sunset. Daniel had stood at the grave and felt nothing. Not grief, not anger, just an emptiness so vast it seemed to swallow the world. The fire had started from a knocked-over lantern, they determined. Anna must have woken in the night, perhaps to check on Thomas, and accidentally bumped the lamp. The cabin had been dry from a long summer. The fire had spread fast. No one's fault, just terrible luck, just life being cruel and random. Daniel had built a new cabin on the same spot, had salvaged what he could from the ashes, the elk carving, a few tools, Anna's wedding ring melted and misshapen, but still recognizably hers. He wore it on a cord around his neck, hidden under his shirt. For 2 years he had lived in the new cabin and felt like a ghost himself, going through motions, waiting for some reason to care about tomorrow. And now, sitting by the fire with Anna's photograph in his hands, Daniel wondered if maybe this was the reason. This frightened girl in the next room, this chance to protect someone when he had failed so utterly before. "Give me strength," he whispered, not to God, who he had stopped talking to after the fire, but to Anna, to the memory of the woman who had believed in him. "Help me not fail again." The fire burned low, the night deepened, and in the small room off the main cabin, Emma Hartley lay on her cot and stared at the ceiling, a key clutched in her hand, unable to quite believe that the lock would keep her safe. Tomorrow would come whether they were ready or not, and with it the slow, careful work of building something new from broken pieces. Samuel sat forward in his chair, his young face intense in the firelight. "Grandpa," he said, "you bought Grandma." Daniel turned from the window where he had been staring out at the snow. "No," he said firmly. "I never bought your grandmother. I gave her a job. I gave her a choice. There is a difference, Samuel, a crucial difference. That contract I wrote with her, right to leave any time, that was not just words on paper. That was my promise that she was a person, not property." Samuel nodded slowly, processing this. "What happened next?" the boy asked. Daniel smiled, though sadness tinged the expression. "Next, the first week was quiet. We learned how to live in the same space, how to work together. She was a quick learner, smarter than Silas ever gave her credit for, stronger too." He paused, remembering. But the second week, that was when things got complicated. That was when Silas came back, and he did not come alone. The old man returned to his chair, settling into it with a soft grunt. Outside, the storm howled, louder wind rattling the windows. Inside, the fire crackled, and the past waited to be spoken into being. "Let me tell you about Robert Cole," Daniel said. "Let me tell you about the man who tried to take everything I had left to care about." The first light of dawn came cold and pale through the cabin window. Daniel woke at 4:30, as he always did, his body trained by years of ranching to rise before the sun. He lay still for a moment, listening. There was a new sound in the cabin now, so faint he almost missed it. Breathing. Someone else alive in this place that had been silent for so long. He rose quietly, dressed in the dark, and made his way to the main room. The fire had burned down to embers during the night. He added kindling and a split log, coaxing the flames back to life. The coffee pot went on next, the familiar ritual grounding him in routine. While the coffee heated, Daniel stood at the window and watched the sky lighten. The mountains to the east were black silhouettes against the gray dawn. Frost covered the grass, making the meadow shimmer like broken glass. It would be a clear day, cold but good for work. Behind him he heard the soft creak of a door opening. Emma emerged from her room, moving carefully, trying not to make noise. She wore the same patched dress from yesterday. Her hair was pulled back, though strands had already escaped to frame her face. She stopped when she saw him, uncertain. "Coffee will be ready in a minute." Daniel said, not turning from the window. Sometimes it was easier to talk when you were not looking directly at someone. Less pressure. Less chance of saying the wrong thing. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood." He poured 2 tin cups when the coffee was ready, handed her one. She took it with both hands as if the warmth was as important as the drink itself. They stood in silence, sipping coffee, as the dawn slowly transformed the world from black and gray to color. Daniel found himself watching her from the corner of his eye. She held the cup close to her face, letting the steam warm her skin. Her hands, he noticed again, showed the toll of her past. Years of labor had left their mark on those young fingers. "We start at 6, Daniel said, "feeding the animals first. I will show you what needs doing." Emma nodded. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood." "Just Daniel is fine." "Yes, Daniel." The name sounded strange on her lips, too familiar perhaps after a lifetime of keeping distance between herself and the men who had power over her. But she said it, and that was enough. Teaching someone a skill they need to survive requires patience, Samuel. Not classroom patience, but the kind where a mistake could mean going hungry or getting hurt. You cannot rush. You cannot assume they know even the basics, and you cannot make them feel small for not knowing. That first morning I taught Emma the essential work of a ranch. We started with Maple the dairy cow. "She needs feeding twice a day," Daniel explained, leading Emma to the small enclosure where Maple stood, chewing contentedly on hay from the previous evening. 10 pounds of hay each time, morning and evening. Water must be fresh. Change it every day even if it looks clean. A cow drinks 30 to 50 gallons a day depending on the weather. Emma listened intently, her eyes moving from Daniel to the cow and back again. "Most important thing is milking," Daniel continued. He fetched the 3-legged stool and the clean bucket from the shed. "Got to do it same time every day, morning and evening. Otherwise her production drops and she can get mastitis, which is painful for her and means no milk for us." He sat on the stool, positioned the bucket, and gestured for Emma to come closer. Maple turned her large head to look at them unbothered. "Right hand here at the top of the teat, left hand below supporting. Squeeze from top to bottom in a smooth motion. Not too hard, not too gentle. Like this." He demonstrated. Milk streamed into the bucket with a rhythmic sound almost musical. After a minute he stood. "Your turn." Emma hesitated, then took the stool. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for the teat. Her first attempt produced nothing. She tried again, squeezing harder. Maple shifted her weight and kicked out gently a warning. "Easy," Daniel said. "You are fighting it. Relax your shoulders. Breathe. The cow can feel your tension." Emma took a breath, tried again. This time a thin stream of milk appeared, then another. She looked up at Daniel with surprise bordering on delight. "Keep going," he said. "Nice and steady. You will get faster with practice." By the time she finished, Emma's hands were cramping and her back ached from the unfamiliar position. But the bucket held nearly 2 gallons of milk, enough for drinking, cooking, and making butter if they had time. "Good work," Daniel said. It was not effusive praise, just a simple statement of fact. But Emma's face colored slightly, and he realized it might have been the first time in a long while anyone had told her she had done something right. They moved on to the horses next. 3 of them in the corral. Thunder, a big gray gelding that Daniel rode for most work. Star, a smaller mare who was getting old but still reliable. And Scout, a young bay who was being trained for saddle work. "Thunder here needs oats and hay," Daniel said, stroking the horse's neck. Thunder pushed his nose against Daniel's hand, searching for treats. 2 pounds of oats morning and evening, free access to hay. Check the water trough daily. In winter you got to break the ice. Emma reached out tentatively to touch Thunder's shoulder. The horse turned his head, regarded her with one large, intelligent eye, then went back to eating. "He likes you," Daniel observed. "How can you tell? He did not bite you or try to knock you down. That is Thunder's way of showing affection." Emma almost smiled. Almost. The chickens were easier. Scatter grain, collect eggs before the hens decided to eat them, make sure they had clean water and protection from foxes at night. Simple work, but essential. By the time they finished the morning feeding, the sun was fully up and Daniel's stomach was reminding him that coffee alone was not breakfast. "Can you cook?" he asked as they walked back to the cabin. "Basic things," Emma said. "Beans, stew, biscuits if I have the ingredients." "We have ingredients. Make whatever you are comfortable with. I am not particular." That was an understatement. For 2 years Daniel had eaten like a man who viewed food as fuel and nothing more. Beans from a can, jerky and hardtack, occasionally a rabbit or grouse if he bothered to hunt. The act of cooking a real meal, of sitting down to eat something that required effort and care, had felt like a betrayal of his grief, as if enjoying food meant he was forgetting the people he had lost. But Emma needed to feel useful, and truthfully, his body was probably suffering from the poor diet. So he sat at the table and watched as she moved around the small kitchen space, taking inventory of what was available. She found flour and lard and salt. Within 20 minutes, she had biscuits in the Dutch oven set over the fire to bake. While they cooked, she fried salt pork and made gravy from the drippings. Nothing fancy, plain frontier food, but the smell that filled the cabin was intoxicating. When she set the plate before him, Daniel looked at it for a long moment. Golden biscuits, crispy pork, thick gravy. The first real breakfast he had eaten in 2 years. "Is something wrong?" Emma asked, worried. "No," Daniel said. His voice was rougher than he intended. "Nothing is wrong." He ate slowly, tasting every bite. The biscuits were slightly uneven, the gravy a bit too salty, but it was warm and filling and made by someone who cared enough to try. Emma ate standing up, taking small bites ready to jump up if he needed anything. "Sit down," Daniel said. "You worked hard this morning. Eat properly." She sat, but perched on the edge of the chair, still ready to move. They ate in silence. Outside, a jay called from the pines. The fire crackled, these small sounds of life filling the space between them. Over the next few days, a routine established itself. Daniel woke first, made coffee, did the early chores. Emma rose at 5, helped with the animals, then cooked breakfast. They worked together through the morning, repairing fences, chopping wood, preparing the ranch for winter. At noon they ate a simple meal. Afternoons meant more work until the sun began its descent. Then evening chores, supper, and the quiet hours by the fire before sleep. Daniel found himself watching Emma work, noting things. She was not strong in the way a man was strong, but she was tireless. She lifted what she could, asked for help with what she could not, and never complained. When he showed her how to mend a fence post, she paid attention and remembered. When he explained the signs of a horse going lame, she looked where he pointed and asked questions. She was smart. That became clear quickly. Smarter than Silas had given her credit for. She absorbed information like dry earth soaking up rain, and she rarely needed to be told something twice. On the 3rd day, Daniel gave her a task to complete alone, mucking out the horse stalls and spreading fresh straw. It was unpleasant work, but necessary. He expected her to need help or to do it poorly. When he came back an hour later, the job was done properly. The old straw and manure had been wheelbarrowed to the compost pile. The stalls were clean. Fresh straw had been spread evenly. The tools had been cleaned and put away. "You have done this before," Daniel said. Emma looked up from where she was filling the water trough. "At my uncle's. He had horses." "He worked you hard." It was not a question. The evidence was written in her calloused hands and the practiced efficiency of her movements. Emma did not answer, which was answer enough. That evening Emma did something unexpected. After supper, she did not immediately retreat to her room. Instead, she took Daniel's work shirt, which had torn at the shoulder, and sat by the fire to mend it. Daniel was reading or trying to. He kept finding his attention drawn to the sight of her there, needle moving in and out of the fabric with small, precise stitches. The domesticity of the scene struck him. This was how evenings used to be with Anna, one reading, one sewing, the comfortable quiet of two people sharing space without needing to fill it with words. "You do not have to do that," Daniel said. Emma did not look up. "I want to. You have been kind to me. This is something I can do in return. I pay you wages for your work." "This is not work. This is thanks." Daniel returned to his book, but the words would not come into focus. He was too aware of her presence, too aware that the cabin no longer felt like a tomb. It felt tentatively, carefully, like it might someday become a home again. The incident happened on the 8th day. Daniel had gone to check the north fence line, leaving Emma to handle the morning chores alone. She had done it before without issue. He trusted her by now. He was a mile from the cabin when he heard the scream, faint, cut short, but unmistakable. Every muscle in his body went tight. He spun and ran, his boots pounding the hard ground, his breath coming in sharp gasps. A dozen terrible scenarios played through his mind. A bear, a mountain lion. Silas had come back. She had been hurt, and he had not been there, had failed again. He burst into the yard to find Emma sitting on the ground near the well, holding her left wrist with her right hand. Her face was white with pain. The water bucket lay on its side, water soaking into the dirt. Daniel dropped to his knees beside her. "What happened?" "I am sorry," Emma gasped. "I was stupid. The bucket was too heavy. I slipped. Let me see." She reluctantly released her grip. Her wrist was already swelling, the skin turning an ugly purple. Daniel touched it gently, probing with his fingers. Emma hissed in pain but did not pull away. "Move your fingers," he instructed. She did. Slowly, painfully, but the fingers responded. "Not broken," Daniel said. "Sprained badly, maybe some torn ligaments." He stood and lifted Emma as if she weighed nothing, which almost she did. She made a small sound of protest, but did not fight him. He carried her into the cabin and set her carefully on one of the chairs. From his supplies, Daniel gathered what he needed. A strip of clean cloth, a small tin of arnica salve that Sarah Mitchell had given him last winter, cold water from the barrel. He soaked the cloth in cold water and wrapped it around Emma's wrist. "Hold that there. The cold will help with the swelling." While she held the compress, Daniel went outside and returned with a handful of willow bark. He shaved it into a cup, poured hot water over it, and let it steep. "Drink this," he said, handing her the cup after removing the bark pieces. "It will help with the pain." Emma drank it, grimacing at the bitter taste. Daniel waited 15 minutes, then removed the cold compress and began applying the arnica salve. His movements were gentle but sure. He had learned basic field medicine in the Army, had patched up enough injuries over the years to know what he was doing. Emma watched his face as he worked. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Caring. About me." Daniel did not stop working, did not look up. "Because you are hurt, and because it is the right thing to do." Most men would not bother. Then most men are fools. He finished applying the salve and began wrapping her wrist with a clean bandage, firm enough to provide support, but not so tight it would cut off circulation. When he tied it off, he sat back and met her eyes. From now on, nothing heavier than 15 pounds without asking for help. Understand? Emma nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "I mean it, Emma. I need you healthy and whole, not trying to prove something by hurting yourself. I just wanted to be useful." "You are useful, but not if you break yourself trying. Smart work beats hard work every time." He stood and moved to the stove. "I will make lunch. You sit there and rest." As he worked, throwing together a simple meal of beans and cornbread, he could feel her watching him. When he glanced back, she was smiling. Just slightly, but it was there. The first real smile he had seen from her. Something in his chest tightened at the sight. Not pain exactly, more like the feeling of frozen ground beginning to thaw. 3 days later, on a Saturday, Daniel decided they needed to go into Pine Ridge for supplies. Emma's wrist was healing well, though still tender. She could do light work, but nothing strenuous. The trip would give her a break from the constant labor. "Ever been to Pine Ridge?" Daniel asked as they loaded into the wagon. "Once or twice, with my uncle. He never let me wander much." "It is not a large town, 250 people, give or take. But it has what we need, general store, blacksmith, church, and Sarah Mitchell, who is the closest thing to a doctor we have out here." They rode in comfortable silence. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day that made you grateful to be alive. The aspens had turned gold, and they lined the road like living flames. Emma sat beside Daniel on the wagon seat, looking around with the wide-eyed attention of someone seeing the world fresh. He wondered how long it had been since she had gone anywhere without fear coloring everything. Pine Ridge appeared as they crested a low rise, a collection of wooden buildings along a single main street. Practical plain, built to survive rather than impress. The kind of town that sprang up wherever there was water and flat enough land for a general store. Daniel guided the wagon to the hitching post outside Patterson's general store. As they climbed down, he noticed several people stopping to stare. Small towns thrived on gossip, and the arrival of a woman at Daniel Blackwood's place would have been news that spread faster than wildfire. The inside of the store smelled of coffee and leather and the indefinable scent of dry goods. Mr. Patterson stood behind the counter, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles and a perpetually worried expression. His wife, a round woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, was arranging canned goods on a shelf. "Mr. Blackwood," Patterson said, nodding. "What can I do for you today?" "Need work clothes," Daniel said. "Trousers, shirts, boots. For Emma here." Mrs. Patterson turned at the mention of a woman's name. Her eyes found Emma and traveled up and down, assessing and judging in equal measure. "So it is true," Mrs. Patterson said. "You took in Silas Hartley's niece." "She works for me," Daniel said flatly. "As a housekeeper. Now about those clothes." Of course. Mrs. Dawes. Patterson came around the counter, all business now, though her eyes still held that calculating gleam. "Let me see what we have in your size, dear." While Emma was being fitted for sturdy work clothes, Daniel heard Mrs. Patterson whisper to her husband, not quite quietly enough, "Living in sin, that is what it is. Disgraceful. Poor Anna must be turning in her grave." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. Not because they hurt him, but because of what they meant for Emma. This was what she would face in town. Assumptions, judgments. The automatic presumption that a woman living with a man must be there for immoral purposes. He turned to face Mrs. Patterson directly. "Ma'am, I pay for goods and services, not for your opinions on how I run my household. If you cannot keep your thoughts to yourself, I will take my business elsewhere." Mrs. Patterson's face flushed red. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Mr. Patterson looked mortified. "My apologies, Mr. Blackwood," Patterson said quickly. "We meant no offense. See that you mean none in the future." The fitting continued in awkward silence. Emma emerged with 2 pairs of sturdy canvas trousers, 3 flannel shirts, and a pair of work boots that actually fit properly. Daniel paid without comment, and they left the store into the clear autumn sunlight. "I am sorry," Emma said quietly as they loaded the packages into the wagon. "I am causing you trouble." "You are not causing anything. Small-minded people cause their own trouble. Do not worry about it." But Emma's face had closed off again, the brief openness of the past few days, retreating behind walls built by a lifetime of being judged and found wanting. They were loading the last of the supplies when a woman's voice called out, "Daniel Blackwood, is that you?" Daniel turned to see Sarah Mitchell approaching. She was a tall woman in her early 40s, her hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing a simple dress and carrying a basket covered with cloth. Her face was weathered from years of outdoor work, but her eyes were kind and intelligent. "Sarah," Daniel said, relieved to see a friendly face. "I heard you had taken on help," Sarah said. Her eyes moved to Emma with open curiosity, but no judgment. "You must be Emma. I am Sarah Mitchell." "Pleased to meet you, ma'am," Emma said softly. Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly as she took in Emma's stance, the way she held her left wrist just slightly away from her body. "You are hurt." Emma blinked in surprise. "How did you know?" "I have been tending injuries for 20 years. You learn to read the signs." She stepped closer, her manner brisk but gentle. "May I see?" Emma glanced at Daniel. He nodded. Slowly Emma extended her arm. Sarah unwrapped the bandage, carefully examined the wrist with practiced fingers, then nodded approvingly. Whoever treated this knew what they were doing. The swelling is down, no sign of infection. You should have full use back in another week or so. Daniel did it, Emma said. Sarah looked at Daniel with something like approval. Anna taught you well. The mention of his wife's name sent the familiar ache through Daniel's chest, but it was softer now, less like a knife and more like an old bruise. She tried, Daniel said. I was not always the best student. You did well enough here. Sarah rewrapped the wrist with the same careful efficiency Daniel had used. Keep it wrapped for another few days. No heavy lifting. And if it starts to hurt worse or you see red streaks, come find me immediately. Thank you, Emma said. Sarah's eyes moved between Emma and Daniel, reading something in the air between them that perhaps they had not fully acknowledged themselves. Daniel, might I have a word? Privately. They stepped a few feet away, leaving Emma by the wagon. Sarah spoke quietly, her tone serious. How is she really? Silas Hartley is a snake. I can only imagine what that girl went through in his house. She does not talk about it, Daniel said. But I can see it in how she moves, like she is always expecting a blow. And you? How are you managing? This is the first time you have let anyone close since— I am managing, Daniel said. He knew what Sarah was really asking. Was he ready for this? For the responsibility of another life depending on him? She needed help. I could provide it. That is all there is to it. Sarah gave him a long look. Is it? Before Daniel could answer, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. 3 riders coming down the main street, moving with the kind of deliberate purpose that meant trouble. Daniel recognized Silas immediately. The other 2 men he did not know, but their type was unmistakable. Hired muscle, men who made their living through intimidation and violence. And in the center rode a man in a black suit and flat-brimmed hat. Even at a distance, Daniel could feel the cold authority radiating from him. Robert Cole, Sarah breathed. Daniel, that is very bad news. Daniel had heard of Robert Cole. Everyone in this part of Montana had. A businessman they called him, though his business was everything the law frowned upon. Gambling, prostitution, protection rackets. He owned half the saloons between here and Helena and owned most of the men who claimed to enforce the law. The 3 riders stopped in front of Daniel's wagon. Silas looked nervous, his eyes darting between Daniel and the man in the black suit. The 2 hired men looked bored, hands resting casually near their gun belts. Robert Cole dismounted with the easy grace of a man who had never doubted his own power. Up close he was perhaps 45, with a lean face and cold eyes the color of dirty ice. He wore his suit like armor and carried himself like a man who expected the world to bend to his will. "Mr. Blackwood," Cole said, his voice smooth as oil. "A pleasure to finally meet you. I have heard much about your ranch." "I doubt any of it was from sources I would trust," Daniel said. His hand moved subtly, positioning himself between Cole and Emma. Cole smiled, a thin expression that never touched his eyes. "Direct. I appreciate that. Allow me to be equally direct." He glanced at Emma, then back to Daniel. "You have something that belongs to a business associate of mine. Emma is not property. She works for me, under a legal contract." "Ah, yes, the contract." Cole pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. Daniel recognized it. A copy of the employment agreement he had written. Silas must have provided it. Clever, but ultimately meaningless. Montana law says otherwise. Cole's smile widened. "Montana law is whatever I say it is, Mr. Blackwood. You see, Silas here owes me a substantial amount of money, $1,500 to be precise, a gambling debt accumulated over several years. That is Silas's problem, not mine. It becomes your problem when Silas offered his niece as collateral. You see, I own several establishments in Helena that are always in need of attractive young women. Emma would be quite valuable in such a role." The meaning was clear, and it made Daniel's blood run cold. Cole was talking about prostitution, about taking Emma and selling her body to pay Silas's debts. "That will never happen," Daniel said. His voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath the words. Cole sighed as if Daniel was being unreasonable. Then I propose an alternative. You pay me the $1,500 Silas owes. I consider the debt settled. Everyone walks away happy. I do not have that kind of money. Then I suggest you find it. You have 2 weeks. Cole remounted his horse with fluid ease. 2 weeks, Mr. Blackwood. After that I will come back, and I will take what is owed to me one way or another. The 3 men rode away, leaving silence in their wake. Daniel stood very still, his mind racing through calculations. $1,500 might as well be $15,000. He had some savings, but nowhere near enough. Emma's voice, small and frightened, broke through his thoughts. Let me go with him. You should not have to pay for my uncle's debts. Daniel turned to her, and the fear in her eyes brought a fierce protectiveness surging up in him. No. But Daniel, that is so much money, more than I could ever be worth. He stepped closer, close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. Listen to me, Emma Hartley. You are worth more than any amount of money, and I will be damned before I let Robert Cole or any man like him lay a hand on you. Do you understand? Tears spilled down her cheeks. But how will you pay? I do not know yet, but I will figure something out. He looked at Sarah, who had been watching the entire exchange with grave concern. Can you help? Sarah nodded immediately. I have some savings, maybe $80. It is yours. I cannot take your money. Daniel Anna was my dearest friend. If she were here, she would do the same for Emma. The money is yours. No arguments. As they prepared to leave, Daniel's mind was already working through the problem. $1,500, 2 weeks. It seemed impossible. But surrender was not an option. Emma's life, her freedom, her very soul was at stake. And Daniel Blackwood, who had failed to save his family from fire, would not fail again. That evening, back at the ranch, Daniel sat at his table with paper and pencil, making calculations by lamplight. Emma had gone to bed exhausted by the day's stress, but Daniel could not rest. Numbers filled the page before him. Assets, debts, possible solutions. None of them added up to enough. He could sell the ranch, but that would take months and probably not fetch full value in a quick sale. He could borrow from the bank, but he still owed money from rebuilding the cabin. His credit was not good enough for a large loan. The door to Emma's room opened quietly. She emerged wrapped in a shawl against the night chill and sat across from him. You should be sleeping, Daniel said. So should you. She looked at the papers spread before him, the scratched-out figures, the growing desperation evident in the progressively harder pencil strokes. I am sorry. This is all because of me. This is because of Silas and Robert Cole, not you. I could leave, disappear. Then Cole would have no reason to bother you. Daniel set down the pencil. Emma, do you know what Robert Cole does to women who work in his saloons, the kind of life they lead? She looked down. I can imagine. Then you know I cannot let that happen, even if you were willing. Then what do we do? Daniel met her eyes, saw the trust there, despite everything, and felt the weight of responsibility settle even heavier on his shoulders. We fight. I do not know how yet, but we fight. Emma reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Her skin was warm, her touch gentle. Thank you for seeing me as worth fighting for. Daniel turned his hand over, grasping hers. You are Emma. Never doubt that. They sat in the lamplight, hands clasped, two damaged people finding strength in each other. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming winter. And somewhere in the darkness, Robert Cole's 2-week deadline hung over them like an executioner's blade. But in that moment, holding Emma's hand and seeing the hope in her eyes, Daniel Blackwood made a silent promise. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, he would protect her. He would find a way. He had to. In his chair by the fire, old Daniel paused in his telling. Samuel sat forward, completely absorbed in the story. 2 weeks, the boy breathed. How did you get the money, Grandpa? Daniel smiled sadly. That is a longer story. One that involves the whole town, a terrible storm, and your grandmother showing courage I never knew she possessed. He glanced at the window where dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. "But that is for tomorrow. You need sleep and so do I." "But Grandpa, you cannot stop there." "I can and I will. Patience, Samuel. The best stories are not rushed." As Samuel reluctantly headed to the guest room, Daniel remained by the fire, lost in memory. He could still feel Emma's hand in his from that night 42 years ago, could still see the fear and hope warring in her eyes, could still remember the absolute certainty he had felt that he would rather die than let Robert Cole take her. Love, he had learned, often began not with passion but with a simple decision, the decision to protect, to stand firm, to refuse to abandon someone who needed you. Everything else came after. The morning after Robert Cole's ultimatum, Daniel rose before dawn as always, but he had not slept. All night he had stared at the ceiling, calculating, planning, discarding one impossible solution after another. $1,500, 2 weeks. The numbers mocked him. He made coffee in the dark, his movements automatic. Through the window, the first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of gray. Another day closer to the deadline. Another day without answers. Behind him, Emma's door opened. She emerged, already dressed, her face showing the same sleepless exhaustion he felt. "I have been thinking," she said without preamble. "There must be something I can do. Work in town, maybe. Save money." $2 a week would take you years to earn $1,500, Daniel said. The math was brutal and final. "And Cole will not wait." "Then what do we do?" Daniel poured her coffee, handed it to her. "I am going into town, to talk to the sheriff, to see what options exist. Legal options. Any options." Pine Ridge looked different in the morning light, less welcoming somehow, as if the town itself had turned hostile after Cole's visit. Daniel rode Thunder down the main street, aware of eyes watching from windows and doorways. News had spread. Of course it had. In a town this small, a confrontation on the main street might as well have been announced by trumpet. The sheriff's office sat at the far end of the street, a low building with barred windows and a solid door. Daniel tied Thunder to the hitching post and went inside. Sheriff Duncan Ross sat behind a scarred wooden desk, cleaning his revolver with practiced efficiency. He looked up as Daniel entered, and something like sympathy crossed his weathered face. "Figured you would be coming by," Duncan said. He was in his 50s, gray-haired and solid, a man who had served in the Union Army and bore the scars to prove it. "Have a seat." Daniel sat. "Tell me about Robert Cole." Duncan set down the gun parts and leaned back in his chair. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. His connections, his weaknesses, how much of the law he owns." "Most of it, Daniel. That is the honest truth." Duncan's voice was heavy with regret. "Cole has judges in Helena, has the territorial marshal on his payroll. Half the county commissioners owe him favors. If you try to fight him through legal channels, you will lose." "Then what do you suggest?" "Pay him. Find the money somehow and pay him. It is the only way that does not end with you dead or in prison." "I do not have that kind of money. You know that." Duncan nodded slowly. "I know. Which is why I have been thinking." He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a small leather pouch. Coins clinked as he set it on the desk. $80. My savings from 3 years as sheriff. It is yours." Daniel stared at the pouch. "Duncan, I cannot take your money." "Yes, you can, because Anna Blackwood was one of the finest women I ever knew, and she would have done the same for Emma. And because Robert Cole is a disease on this territory, and if I can help stop him from taking another victim, then my $80 is well spent." The words lodged in Daniel's throat. He managed a nod, unable to speak. "That still leaves you well short," Duncan continued, "but word is getting around. There are folks in this town who are not afraid of Cole, or who are tired of being afraid. You might be surprised who steps up." Daniel's next stop was Sarah Mitchell's cabin, a tidy structure on the south edge of town with a small herb garden and a sign that read, "Healing and Midwifery." Sarah answered the door before he could knock. "I was expecting you," she said, ushering him inside. The interior smelled of dried herbs and soap. Bundles of plants hung from the rafters. Shelves held bottles and jars of remedies. On a small table sat a tin box. Sarah picked up the box and handed it to Daniel. $75. Everything I have saved from deliveries and doctoring. Take it. Sarah, this is your security, your future. My future is fine. I have skills and a good reputation. Emma has nothing but you standing between her and Cole. Sarah's eyes were fierce. Anna was my sister in every way that mattered. When she died, I felt like I lost part of myself. Helping Emma is how I honor her memory. So take the damn money, Daniel, and do not insult me by refusing. Daniel took the box. His vision blurred slightly. Thank you. Save your thanks. Just bring that girl back safe. Over the next 3 days, something remarkable happened. People began arriving at Daniel's ranch, people he barely knew. Some he had never spoken to beyond a nod in passing. Mr. Patterson from the general store rode out on a Sunday afternoon. He dismounted awkwardly, clutching an envelope. My wife felt bad about what she said, Patterson explained, not quite meeting Daniel's eyes. We talked. She agreed you were doing right by that girl. This is $40. It is not charity. Call it an investment in decency. Jacob Moore, the blacksmith, came next. A huge man with arms like tree trunks and a surprisingly gentle manner. $25, he said, handing over coins wrapped in cloth. I got a daughter back east. If she ever needed help and someone turned her away because of gossip, I would never forgive myself. The widow Chen, who ran the boarding house, brought $15 in small coins. I know what it is to be alone and afraid, she said in her accented English. You keep that girl safe. Young Tom Bradley, barely 20, who worked at the livery stable, brought $10. It is all I got saved, he said. But Cole, he had my brother killed last year over a card debt. Anything that hurts Cole is worth every penny. By the end of the 3rd day, Daniel had collected an additional $500. Combined with Sarah's $75 and Duncan's $80 and his own savings of $340, the total came to just over $995. Still $500 short. Emma watched the parade of visitors with wonder. I never knew there were so many good people, she said. Most people are good, Daniel replied. They just need a reason to show it. But good intentions would not make up the shortfall. $500 might as well be $5,000. Daniel had 1 week left and no idea where the rest would come from. The storm came on the 6th night. Daniel had seen it building all day, dark clouds massing over the mountains, the air turning thick and electric. By evening the first drops began to fall. By full dark it was a deluge. Rain hammered the roof like bullets. Wind screamed through the pines, bending them nearly double. Thunder rolled across the sky in continuous percussion, and lightning turned the world white every few seconds. Daniel stood at the window watching water sheet off the eaves. Going to be a bad one, he said. Emma stood beside him, her face pale in the lamplight. How bad? Bad enough. We might lose shingles. Maybe a tree comes down. Just have to wait it out. As if in response, a tremendous crash of thunder shook the cabin. The horses in the corral began screaming. Daniel grabbed his oilskin coat. I have to check on them. Thunder gets crazy in storms. If he hurts himself, I lose my best horse. I will come with you. No, too dangerous. Emma was already pulling on her own coat. You might need help. I am coming. There was no time to argue. Daniel grabbed a lantern and they plunged out into the storm. The rain was cold and violent, driven nearly horizontal by the wind. Within seconds, Daniel was soaked through. The lantern barely penetrated the darkness. He could hear the horses panicking, could see shadowy forms moving in the corral. Thunder, the big gray gelding, was rearing and kicking, his eyes rolling white with terror. The other horses were pressed against the far fence, trying to get away from his flailing hooves. "Easy, boy," Daniel called, but his voice was lost in the storm. He approached carefully, hands out, trying to project calm. Thunder saw him and charged, not out of malice but from pure fear. Daniel barely had time to dive aside. The horse's shoulder caught him anyway, sending him sprawling into the mud. Pain exploded in his left side, his ribs, maybe cracked, maybe just badly bruised. He tried to get up, but his boots slipped in the muck. Thunder reared again directly over him. Those hooves could crush a man's skull like a melon. Daniel tried to roll away, but the mud held him. And then Emma was there. She stepped between Daniel and the terrified horse, her small body blocking Thunder's path. She held up both hands, and her voice rang out clear and strong despite the storm. "Thunder, stop!" The horse hesitated. Something in her tone, something in her fearless stance cut through his panic. Emma took a step forward. "You know me. I feed you every morning. I brush you. I give you apples from the barrel. You know me, Thunder. And I am telling you it is all right. The storm cannot hurt you. We are here. You are safe." She kept talking, kept moving forward slowly until she could touch Thunder's neck. The horse flinched, but did not pull away. Emma stroked his wet hide, murmuring words Daniel could not hear over the rain. Gradually, impossibly, Thunder calmed. His breathing slowed. His eyes stopped rolling. He lowered his head and pressed it against Emma's chest, seeking comfort like a child. Daniel pulled himself upright, clutching his ribs. He stared at Emma in amazement. She looked small and fragile against the massive horse, but there was nothing fragile in her bearing. She was a pillar of calm in the chaos. Between them, they got Thunder and the other horses into the shed out of the worst of the storm. By the time they stumbled back to the cabin, both were shaking from cold and exertion. Daniel's ribs throbbed with every breath. Emma's hands were scraped raw from handling wet rope. They stood dripping on the cabin floor, looking at each other. "You saved my life," Daniel said. "You saved mine first. We are even. Emma, that was the bravest thing I have ever seen." She shook her head. "It was just Thunder. He trusts me. Because you earned that trust, the same way you are earning mine." Something shifted in the air between them, some invisible barrier crumbling. They were both soaked and muddy and exhausted, but Daniel found himself unable to look away from her face. Water dripped from her hair. Her eyes were bright in the lamplight. "You should get out of those wet clothes," Daniel managed to say, "before you catch your death." Emma did not move. "Daniel, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Why are you really doing this, fighting Cole? Spending all this money? It cannot just be because you hired me." Daniel took a slow breath, his ribs protesting. This was the moment. The truth or another comfortable lie. He chose truth. "Because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for, someone worth protecting." He paused, then continued before courage failed him. "Because somewhere in the past 2 weeks, you stopped being just a hired hand. You became someone I care about, deeply." Emma's breath caught. "Daniel, I know this is not fair. You are here because you had nowhere else to go. I have no right to feel this way. But I need you to know before whatever happens with Cole that you matter to me, not as property, not as an obligation, as a person, as someone I have come to." He could not quite say the word love, not yet, but he came close. "As someone important." Emma closed the distance between them. She reached up and touched his face, her cold fingers against his cheek. "You think I do not feel it too? You think I have not been afraid to admit that every morning I wake up grateful to be here, that I go to sleep feeling safe for the first time in my life, that when I think about Cole taking me away, the thing that terrifies me most is leaving you." Daniel's hand covered hers. "Emma, I love you, Daniel Blackwood. I think I have loved you since the day you wrote that contract giving me a choice, since you treated me like a human being instead of a burden." The words hung between them, huge and impossible and true. "But you need to know something," Emma continued, and now there were tears mixing with the rainwater on her face. "Silas told you I am barren. It is true. The women in my family, my mother's sisters, they all said I would never have children. My courses have never been regular. Sometimes months go by. If you want a family, if you want children to replace what you lost, I cannot give you that." Daniel pulled her close, careful of his ribs, and rested his forehead against hers. "I do not want a replacement for Anna and Thomas. I want a future with you, whatever that looks like. Children or not, it does not matter. You matter." They kissed, then awkward and desperate and real. It tasted of rain and salt and the terrifying courage of two broken people choosing to try again. When they finally pulled apart, both were trembling. Emma laughed a sound of pure joy. "We are going to get sick standing here in wet clothes." "Probably. And your ribs are broken." "Just bruised. And we still owe Cole $500 we do not have." "I know. And yet somehow I have never been happier." Daniel smiled. Really smiled for the first time in 2 years. "Neither have I." They changed into dry clothes in separate rooms, modesty still intact despite the confessions. When Emma emerged, Daniel was sitting by the fire moving gingerly. She sat beside him and leaned her head on his shoulder. "We will find a way," she said. "Yes, we will." Outside the storm raged on, but inside something new had been born, not just between two people, but within them. Hope. The fragile, dangerous hope that maybe, just maybe, life could be good again. The next morning brought clear skies and Sheriff Duncan riding hard up to the cabin. His face was grim as he dismounted. "Daniel, we have a problem." "What is it?" "Cole is not waiting. He is coming today. Him and at least 5 men. They are gathering at the saloon in Pine Ridge right now." Daniel felt his blood turn cold. He said 2 weeks. He lied, or he decided he does not care. Either way, they will be here by noon. Emma, who had come out onto the porch, went white. "What do we do?" Duncan looked between them. "Fight or run. Those are your options. If you run, I cannot protect you. Cole has reached throughout the territory. If you fight, I will stand with you. But I am one man. Against 6, the odds are not good." Daniel's mind raced. Fight or run. Stay and probably die or flee and spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders. He looked at Emma, saw the fear in her eyes, but also something else. Determination. She would run if he asked her to, but she would rather stand. "We fight," Daniel said. Duncan nodded. "I figured you would say that. Then we better get ready." The next 3 hours were a blur of preparation. Daniel retrieved his weapons from storage. The Winchester rifle he had carried in the Army, the Colt revolver that had been his father's only worthwhile legacy, the shotgun he used for hunting. He cleaned each one, loaded them, set them within easy reach. Duncan helped him fortify the cabin. They shuttered the windows, leaving only gun ports, moved furniture to create cover, filled buckets with water in case of fire. Emma watched her face pale, but composed. "I want to help." Daniel hesitated, then handed her his smaller revolver, a .38 Smith & Wesson. "Have you ever fired a gun?" "No." "Then now is the time to learn." Behind the cabin, with the sun climbing toward noon, Daniel taught Emma the basics. How to hold the weapon, how to aim, how to squeeze the trigger rather than pulling it. "The recoil will kick up," he explained. "Expect it, and aim for the center of the body, the biggest target." Emma fired 6 rounds at a tree trunk 20 feet away, hit it 3 times. Not great accuracy, but enough. Enough to maybe save her life if it came to that. "I do not want to kill anyone," Emma said, staring at the gun in her hands. "Neither do I. But Cole will not give us a choice." They went back inside. The cabin felt like a fortress now, but also like a trap. If Cole set fire to it, they would burn the same way Anna and Thomas had burned. Daniel tried not to think about that. At 11:30 they saw dust on the horizon, riders coming fast. "Positions," Daniel said quietly. Duncan took the north window, his rifle ready. Daniel took the south. Emma crouched behind an overturned table, the revolver in her shaking hands. The riders came into view. 6 men, just as Duncan had warned. Robert Cole in front, immaculate in his black suit despite the ride. Silas Hartley beside him, looking nervous. 4 hired guns bringing up the rear, hard men with dead eyes. They stopped 50 yards from the cabin, far enough to make shooting difficult, close enough to talk. "Mr. Blackwood," Cole called out, "I believe we had an agreement." "We had 2 weeks," Daniel shouted back. "It has been 6 days." "I reconsidered the timeline. "Do you have my money?" "I have $995. It is all I could raise." Cole laughed. "Not enough, not nearly enough. So I will take the girl instead. Send her out and we will call the debt settled." "No. I am trying to be reasonable, Blackwood, but my patience has limits. Send her out or we come in and take her. Your choice." Daniel's finger rested on the trigger. "You want her? You go through me." Cole sighed. "So be it." He wheeled his horse and rode back to his men. They dismounted, pulled rifles from their saddles and spread out in a rough semicircle. "Here we go," Duncan muttered. The first shot shattered one of the gun port shutters, splinters flying. Daniel returned fire, the Winchester bucking against his shoulder. One of Cole's men dove for cover behind a water trough. Gunfire erupted from both sides. The world became noise and smoke and the sharp smell of cordite. Bullets punched through the cabin walls. Glass shattered. Wood splintered. Daniel fired, reloaded, fired again. Beside him, Duncan was doing the same, his movements economical and practiced. Emma crouched behind her barricade, flinching with each impact. One of Cole's men made a run for the cabin. Duncan shot him through the leg. The man went down screaming. Another tried to circle around to the back. Daniel caught him in the open and put a bullet in his shoulder. He fell and did not get up, but there were still 4 of them, and they were getting closer. A bullet caught Daniel in his already bruised side, spinning him around. Pain exploded through his ribs. He went down hard, the Winchester clattering from his hands. "Daniel!" Emma's scream cut through the chaos. He tried to get up, but his body would not cooperate. Blood spread across his shirt. Through the pain, he realized he had been shot. Not just bruised this time, actually shot. Duncan grabbed him, dragged him behind cover. "How bad?" "Bad enough." Daniel's voice came out as a wheeze. Emma was beside him, then her face white with terror. "No, no, no, no. You do not get to die on me." "Not planning to," Daniel managed. But the blood kept coming. More gunfire. Duncan was holding them off, but he was one man. Eventually they would overwhelm him. Emma looked at the revolver in her hand, looked at Daniel bleeding on the floor, looked at Duncan fighting alone. Something hardened in her face. She stood up. "Emma, get down!" Duncan yelled. But Emma moved to the window. One of Cole's men was reloading behind the water trough. She raised the revolver with both hands the way Daniel had taught her, aimed for center mass, squeezed the trigger. The gun kicked in her hands. Through the smoke she saw the man jerk, clutch his chest, and fall. Emma stared at what she had done, horror and shock warring on her face. Then she turned and vomited in the corner, but the balance had shifted. 3 men down. Cole and Silas and 2 hired guns left. And now they knew the people in the cabin would fight, would kill. "Blackwood," Cole shouted, "this is pointless. You are wounded, bleeding out. Surrender now, and I will let you live." Daniel, propped against the wall, his hand pressed to the wound in his side, managed to laugh. It hurt like hell. "Go to hell, Cole." Silence. Then Cole's voice again, but different now, uncertain. "You are a fool, Blackwood." "Maybe. But I am a fool who is not afraid of you." More silence. Then incredibly the sound of horses, moving away. Duncan risked a look through the gun port. They are leaving. Cole and his men. They are riding away. Emma dropped to her knees beside Daniel. "You are bleeding so much." "I have been hurt worse." That was a lie. He had never been shot before. But Emma did not need to know that. Duncan crouched beside them, examining the wound with practiced hands. Bullet went through, missed the vitals. "But you have lost blood." "We need Sarah." "Can you ride?" Daniel asked. "I can ride. You stay here and try not to die." Duncan was already moving out the door onto his horse. Emma tore strips from her dress, pressed them against Daniel's wound. Her hands shook, but her voice was steady. "You are not dying. Do you hear me? I just told you I love you. You do not get to leave me alone." Daniel managed a weak smile. "Bossy. You have no idea." He closed his eyes. The pain was enormous, but beneath it, he felt something else. Peace. Emma was safe. Cole had run. Whatever happened now, he had done what he promised. He had protected her. Daniel? Emma's voice pulled him back from the edge of darkness. Stay with me. Talk to me. About what? Anything. Everything. Tell me about Anna. About Thomas. So Daniel talked. His voice fading in and out, but the words coming. He told her about Anna's laugh, about Thomas's obsession with carving, about the life he had lost and the guilt he carried. You would have liked them, he said. I am sure I would have. But Daniel, you need to know something. They would want you to be happy, to live, not to die trying to protect someone you barely know. I know you, better than I have known anyone in a long time. Emma kissed his forehead. Then stay alive, for me, for us. Time became strange. Daniel floated in and out of consciousness. At some point, Sarah arrived, her bag of medical supplies in hand. She cut away his shirt, examined the wound, her face grave. He has lost a lot of blood, but if the wound does not infect, he might make it. Might, not will. Might. Sarah worked with steady hands, cleaning the wound, packing it with herbs that smelled of mint and something sharper, bandaging him with strips of clean cloth. He needs rest, weeks of it. No work, no stress. Emma nodded. He will rest. I will make sure. And you, Sarah said, looking at Emma with new respect. Duncan told me what you did. Told me you shot a man to protect them. Emma looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. I killed someone. You saved lives. There is a difference. It does not feel different. Sarah touched Emma's shoulder. It will in time. The guilt will fade. What you are left with is the knowledge that when it mattered you were strong. Remember that. 3 days later, Daniel woke in his own bed, weak but alive. Emma sat beside him, her hand in his. She looked exhausted. How long? He croaked. 3 days. You have been drifting in and out. Sarah said it was touch and go. But I made it. You made it. Daniel squeezed her hand. Cole? Gone. Duncan says he left Montana entirely. The territorial marshal finally decided to investigate him. Turns out shooting at a ranch in broad daylight was too public even for Cole. He fled to avoid arrest. And Silas? Emma's face hardened. In jail. They charged him with attempted murder, human trafficking, and some other things I do not fully understand. He is going to hang. How do you feel about that? I feel nothing. He stopped being family a long time ago. Over the next 2 weeks, as Daniel slowly healed, the full story emerged. One of Cole's wounded men had talked desperate for leniency, had given up names, dates, details of every illegal thing Cole had done. The web of corruption began to unravel. Judges were removed. Marshals were arrested. Robert Cole's empire crumbled in a matter of weeks. And through it all, Emma stayed by Daniel's side, changing his bandages, making him eat even when he had no appetite, reading to him from the books on his shelf. Sarah visited, often checking on his progress. On one such visit, she pulled Emma aside while Daniel slept. I need to examine you, Sarah said. Emma blinked. Why I am not hurt. Not for injuries, for something else. Something in Sarah's tone made Emma follow her outside. In the privacy of the yard, Sarah asked a series of questions. When was Emma's last monthly course? Had she been feeling nauseated? Tired? Different? Emma answered carefully. I have never been regular. Sometimes 3 or 4 months pass. But now that you mention it, I have been feeling strange, sick in the mornings, but I thought it was stress. Sarah's examination was quick and thorough. When she finished, her face wore a small smile. Emma, you are with child. The words did not make sense at first. Emma stared at Sarah, waiting for the joke, the misunderstanding, the correction. That is impossible. I am barren. Everyone said so. Everyone was wrong. Your family probably misunderstood irregular courses for infertility. But you are most certainly pregnant. About 6 weeks, I would estimate. Emma sat down hard on the porch step. A baby. She was going to have a baby. With Daniel. But how? When? Sarah raised an eyebrow. "I assume you know how these things work." "I mean, we only just—" Emma's face went bright red. "The night of the storm," Sarah guessed. In the emotion of the moment, Emma remembered. They had kissed, had held each other, had found comfort in each other's arms while the world fell apart outside. She had thought that was all, but apparently nature had other plans. "I need to tell Daniel." "You do. But Emma, this is a good thing, a blessing. My uncle said I was worthless because I could not have children. He based my entire value on a lie." "Then your uncle was a fool. You are not worthless. You never were. And now you have proof." Emma went inside. Daniel was awake, sitting up carefully, his hand pressed to his bandaged side. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said. Emma knelt beside the bed. "Daniel, I need to tell you something. Is it bad? Because I have had enough bad news for a lifetime." "It is not bad. At least I do not think it is bad, but it is unexpected." She took his hand, placed it on her stomach. "Daniel, I am pregnant." He stared at her. "But you said you could not." "I was wrong, or they were wrong, or I do not know, but Sarah confirmed it. I am 6 weeks along." Daniel's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and then slowly wonder. "A baby. A baby." He pulled her close, kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Emma Hartley, will you marry me, properly in a church with witnesses?" "Yes, God, yes." They held each other while the afternoon light slanted through the window. Two people who had been broken, who had found each other in the worst circumstances, who had fought and bled, and somehow impossibly won. Silas Hartley hanged on a cold December morning. Emma did not attend. She felt she owed him nothing, not even the witnessing of his death. But she heard about it later from Sarah, how he had been defiant to the end, how he had cursed Daniel and Emma both, how he had died badly, the drop not quite breaking his neck, leaving him to strangle slowly. Emma felt nothing, not satisfaction, not grief, just a distant acknowledgement that a chapter had closed. Daniel and Emma married in January in the small church in Pine Ridge. Sheriff Duncan stood as Daniel's witness, Sarah as Emma's. Half the town attended, the same people who had contributed money now bringing gifts, quilts and preserves and good wishes. Mrs. Patterson gave Emma a handmade lace collar and whispered, "I am sorry for what I said. You are a good woman." Emma forgave her. Holding grudges took energy she would rather spend on happiness. They honeymooned in the cabin, Daniel still recovering, Emma growing rounder by the week. They talked about the future, about adding rooms to the cabin, about what they would name the baby. "If it is a girl," Emma said one evening, "I want to call her Lily, for new beginnings. And if it is a boy, Thomas, to honor what you lost." Daniel's eyes shone. "Anna would have liked that. I wish I could have met her." "In a way you did. She is the reason I knew how to treat you right. Everything good I do, I learned from her." Emma leaned against him. "Then I owe her a debt I can never repay." "You pay it by being happy. That is all she would have wanted." Spring came, and with it, Lily Anna Blackwood, born in the cabin with Sarah attending after 16 hours of labor that left Emma exhausted and Daniel pacing the yard like a madman. When Sarah finally brought the baby out wrapped in a clean blanket, Daniel took her with shaking hands. She was tiny, red-faced, furious at being born. Perfect. "Hello, Lily," he whispered. "Welcome to the world." Emma, propped up in bed, held out her arms. Daniel placed the baby gently in them. Mother and daughter regarded each other with equal wonder. "We did it," Emma said. "We made a family." Yes, we did. And in that moment, with his wife and newborn daughter, safe with the spring sun warming the cabin and the smell of new growth on the wind, Daniel Blackwood felt something he had not felt in 3 years. Complete. The fire had burned low in the hearth. Outside, full dawn had arrived, painting the snow-covered ranch in shades of pink and gold. Daniel Blackwood, now 77 years old, looked at his grandson across the dimmed room. "And that," he said, "is how a $35 dairy cow changed my life. How I met your grandmother. How I learned that the value of a person has nothing to do with their price." Samuel sat speechless. His young face showed traces of tears. "Grandma Emma was sold for a cow. She was traded, but I never bought her. That distinction mattered, still matters. And the baby Lily, that was my mother. That was your mother, who grew up strong and smart and married a good man, who gave me you." Samuel stood and walked to the window, looking out at the ranch that his grandfather had built. "All of this, the land, the family, everything, it started with you refusing to turn away. It started with a choice, the choice to do right even when it was hard, even when it cost more than I could afford." Daniel stood slowly, joints protesting, and joined his grandson at the window. "That is what I want you to understand, Samuel. Life will give you chances to be cruel, to be selfish, to turn away from people who need help. Those are the easy choices. The hard choice is to stand up, to protect, to sacrifice. Did you ever regret it? Taking her and fighting Cole?" Daniel smiled. "Not for 1 second. Every moment of pain, every dollar spent, every drop of blood, it was worth it, because it gave me 40 years with the finest woman I ever knew. It gave me your mother. It gave me this ranch, this life, this family, all from one choice. I want to be like you, Grandpa. Then be kind when you can. Be brave when you must, and never ever value a person by what you can get from them. Value them for who they are." Samuel nodded, the lesson sinking deep. From the guest room they heard stirring. Samuel's mother, Lily, emerging for breakfast. She looked so much like Emma, the same determination in her eyes, the same quiet strength. "Good morning," she said, smiling at them both. "You two are up early." "Your father was telling me how he met Grandma," Samuel said. Lily's smile softened. "The cow story. He loves that one." "It is a good story," Daniel said, "and it is all true. I know, Dad. I heard it 100 times growing up." She kissed his cheek. "But it never gets old." She went to start breakfast, leaving Daniel and Samuel alone again. "One more thing," Daniel said. "Your grandmother. She passed 5 years ago, and not a day goes by that I do not miss her. But before she died, she made me promise something. She made me promise to tell this story, to make sure you and your children and their children know what we came from. Know that family is not just blood. It is choice. It is standing up when it would be easier to walk away." "I will remember, Grandpa." "Good. Now let us go help your mother with breakfast. These old bones are hungry." As they walked to the kitchen together, Daniel glanced back at his chair by the fire. At the photograph on the mantel that showed Emma at 60, her hair gray, but her eyes still bright. Beside it, a newer photo of Lily and Samuel's father, 3 generations smiling at the camera. And on the shelf, carefully preserved, a small wooden elk, charred on one side, but still beautiful. Still a reminder of what was lost and what was found. Daniel Blackwood had lived a long life, had loved and lost and loved again, had faced death and emerged scarred but whole. And if someone had asked him in that moment whether he would change anything about the day Silas Hartley drove up with a cow and a frightened girl, he would have said no, not one thing. Because that day, for $35 and a promise to do right, Daniel Blackwood had bought a dairy cow named Maple and received a future worth more than all the gold in Montana. The snow had stopped falling outside. Dawn light flooded the ranch house, turning everything golden. Daniel Blackwood stood at the window one last time, his reflection ghostly in the glass. 77 years of living, of loving, of choosing right over easy. Samuel came to stand beside him. The boy said nothing, but his hand found his grandfather's shoulder and squeezed. "Thank you, Grandpa," Samuel said finally, "for telling me, for showing me what it means to be a man." Daniel turned from the window. In the kitchen, Lily was making breakfast. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air. Life continuing as it always did, built on the choices of those who came before. "Remember this, Samuel," Daniel said. Every person you meet has a price in someone else's eyes, but their worth. That is something else entirely. Worth is what you see when no one is looking. Worth is what remains when everything else is stripped away. Samuel nodded, understanding settling deep in his young bones. Outside, the first rays of sun struck the weathered sign above the ranch gate. Blackwood Ranch, established 1882. Below it, in smaller letters that Daniel had added years ago, built on $35 and one good choice. Daniel Blackwood smiled. His story was told. The lesson passed down. And somewhere he liked to think Emma was smiling too. The morning was just beginning.